Okay, good morning, everybody. It is September 12th, 2025. I want to say welcome to the new subscribers. And thank you, everyone. Had a lot of likes, a lot of comments lately. Really appreciated it. Again, I do read the comments, even though I do respond to some, not a lot, but I do certainly read them. Um, so I always encourage you, please feel free to leave comments. And again, hope you will subscribe to the channel and like the video. So, on to the topic today. Okay. Uh, we've had some pretty interesting economic data drop in the last few days, and Jerome Powell now has an impossible choice. And let me talk about it. First off, the Fed has a dual mandate, has two things it's got to focus on. One keeps inflation low and unemployment low. The problem with this is that how the Fed sets interest rates, uh, the Fed interest rate works differently with each of these mandates. So let's start with the unemployment mandate. The general rule is as the Fed lowers the rate, unemployment goes down. So they work in tandem with each other. They are directly correlated. Lower interest rate, lower unemployment. By the way, I'm going to massively oversimplify all of this. So yes, I understand if you get into a ton of detail, it's not going to quite work as easily as I make it sound. But that would be a very long video. Um, so for unemployment, lower rate, lower unemployment. For inflation, it's the opposite. They're inversely correlated, meaning that a higher interest rate results in lower inflation. So again, as the interest rate goes, but I'm sorry, and the opposite side of that would mean that as the interest rate drops, inflation rises. Now, I understand that we went through a deflationary period in the 2010s and teens, and so there's some exceptions to that. Again, I'm oversimplifying, I know it. But nonetheless, if you are Jerome Powell, you have two legal mandates from Congress that you have to follow. Keep the inflation low, keep the unemployment low. The problem you face is that as you move interest rates, whether they go up or down, they affect those two mandates differently. In fact, they affect them in opposite ways. This can make life very difficult. So it means you have to have a balancing act. Well, here is why Powell has a impossible choice right now. First, we got new CPI. CPI is consumer price inflation. That is the primary inflation metric. There's lots of different inflation metrics that the Fed looks at. This is the most important one. What it showed is year over year is we just hit 2.9%. Now, you got to remember the Fed has 2% as the target, 2% is the ideal. Do not go below 1% and do not go above 3%. 2% is perfect. They're at 2.9. So they're right at the ceiling. This is about the maximum number that the Fed can tolerate before it's supposed to have to step in and say, we got to bring inflation down. But that's not the really bad part. The bad part is the month over month. The month over month was 0.4%. Now you may say, okay, well, I thought you said the ceiling was 3%, the target is 2%, so why is 0.4 a problem? Because it's month over month. If you annualize that, you multiply it by 12, you'd be looking at 4.8% inflation, way the hell above the 3% threshold. So what you have is the year over year is right at the threshold, and the month over month is well in excess of the threshold. The core inflation, and the CPI core is CPI without food and energy. The reason they do this is because food and energy tend to be a lot more volatile than the other things. So the idea is you pull them out, and what you see is a more consistent inflation. And so think of it as like goods inflation. It gives you a better idea of what is what is happening on a consistent basis as opposed to month volatility that you see in food and electricity prices. Core is at 3.1. So core inflation has now broken the 3-point threshold. Core month over month is at 0.3%, which again, if you annualize, multiply it by 12, means it's at 3.6%. Again, well in excess of the 3% upper limit. So the basic point of all this is that the CPI data is telling Jerome Powell, raise rates. It's not telling him keep rates the same. It's saying raise the rate. But you may remember we've had a load of bad unemployment data. The August jobs report sucked. I did a video on that. We had the big downward revision, which showed over 800,000 jobs from March of 24 through March of 25 that had been announced were actually not created. Now, again, these revisions are normal. They do happen. However, this was a very, very large revision, much larger than, again, revisions are normal. A revision of this size is not normal. And also showed that in June of this year, the economy lost jobs. So basically, all that data indicated that the jobs numbers are worse than anybody thought they were. But here's the other thing. That's not the only data. I've covered all that data in prior videos. We had another data point come out, and I've talked about this one before, which is weekly jobless claims. Weekly jobless claims is something to follow that gives you a really good idea of what's going on in the labor market. It's one that I tend to follow pretty closely. Generally, we've been in the new, so you lose your job, you go out, you apply for unemployment benefits. This tracks how many people are doing that. We've been fairly consistently for the last several months getting 220, 230,000 people a week, somewhere in that range happening. I think it got up into the 240s at one point, dropped into the two teens a few times, but it's generally been in that 220, 230 range. It hit 263. That's its highest level in years. So what we are seeing is that our employment situation, we had a whole bunch of data come out that says things over the last several months have actually been a lot worse than we thought they were. And now we have the leading, so those are all lagging indicators. We now have the leading indicator saying not only are things getting worse, but they're getting worse even faster than we thought on the job front. So what the employment data is saying is cut the interest rates. So if you are Powell, you have a very interesting dilemma. You have inflation data saying raise the rate. It is not saying keep the rate the same. It is saying raise it. You have employment data saying cut the rate. Again, it is not saying keep the rate the same. It's saying cut it. And you got to make a decision which way you're going to go. And here's the second problem. No matter which way you go, you're going to have backlash for it. Because if you raise the rate, that's bad for the unemployment number. If you cut the rate, that could goose inflation and make it even worse. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. This is a true pick your poison scenario. Now, the other problem he's got is Trump is out there screaming on social media every day, cut the rate, cut the rate, cut the rate, and cut it big, cut it huge. Because Trump has a budget problem. Trump's budget problem is that the net interest on the federal debt is over $1.2 trillion, and it is guzzling money right now. He needs to be able to refinance old American debt for lower interest rates so that he can bring that number down and have more money to spend. Trump is a big spender. He loves spending money through the government. He broke all of Obama's spending records in his first term. Now he's trying to break Biden's spending records. So you have Trump who wants major rate cuts, not because of the employment situation and not because of the inflation situation, but because of the government debt situation, which is not part of the Fed mandate. So at this point, if you are Powell, it doesn't matter what direction you go, there is a major downside. If anyone's saying, okay, so what's the right answer? What's the answer I do where there's nothing but upside and no downside? I'm here to tell you it doesn't exist. He has got to make his choice. Now, a lot of people, oh, well, he should have cut rates a while ago. Really? Have you looked at these inflation numbers? If he cut rates a while ago, they'd almost certainly be even worse than they are. Now, on the other hand, those same people who say he should have cut rates a while ago do have a point. Look at the jobs numbers. They suck. If he cut rates a while ago, good chance they'd be at least a little bit better, maybe a lot better, who knows. The point is, no matter which way Powell had gone, there was going to be a downside. And no matter which way he goes now, there's going to be a downside. By the way, if you're wondering, well, what's the stock market doing to all this? Well, they have priced in the next Fed rate cut several times over. When the next Fed rate, by the way, I firmly think the Fed is going to cut rates at this point in September because based on his recent comments over the last several weeks, what Powell is looking at is he's saying, look, employment's the more important of the two. He seems more concerned about the employment situation than the inflation situation, which leads me to believe he will opt to do the rate cut and just accept the negative consequences on inflation. Well, either way, that's where he's at. I'm sorry, that's what I was going to say, and I completely lost it. But either way, that's where we're at. So I do think we're going to have, stock market. For anyone wondering, when he announces the rate cut, you might be thinking, well, okay, if they've priced in the rate cut multiple times, that means when the rate cut happens, stock market probably really won't move. Like it shouldn't have an impact if it's already been priced in. This is a logical, rational, coherent way of thinking about it. But this is the stock market. My guess, my theory, my expectation is we'll see a fairly large rally on the day when the rate cut is announced, because they will then price in the rate cut again, even though they've already priced it in multiple times over. Our current stock market valuation is priced in many rate cuts that never happen, and they have compounded them. They keep piling on. They don't say, oh, we were wrong, price it out. No, they just say, oh, well, it's okay. The next meeting will have the rate cut and we're going to price it in. So, by the way, I own index funds, so I'm pretty happy with this because it just keeps pushing my portfolio value higher and higher and higher. But either way, impossible days for Jerome Powell. I do not envy that man, the job he has to do, and I wish him well.